Good evening. Early voting has been steady in the region, with those booths already open set to be joined by more next week.
Currently, early votes can be cast at Invercargill's electorate headquarters at the Menzies building in the Crescent, RSA Hall Winton, Great North Road, the Gore Public Library on Norfolk Street and Fiordland Community House, Luxmore Street, Te Anau. From Monday the 15th, votes can also be cast at the Windsor Community Church on Windsor Street, and from Wednesday the 17th, votes can be cast at the St Andrews Youth Centre on Ellis Road. Invercargill Returning Officer Sandra Robbs says voting has been steady at the Menzies building electorate headquarters, which is currently open each day from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. this Saturday.
Southern District Police are paying extra attention to heavy motor vehicles over the month of September as part of a nationwide operation. Regular road policing staff are working alongside specialist commercial vehicle investigation units as part of the operation that targets driving behaviours like speed, safety belts, mobile phone use, plus drug and drink driving. Other road safety aspects specific to the heavy motor vehicle industry, like correct use of logbooks, vehicle defects and vehicle loadings, will also be examined. Senior Sergeant Steve Larking says evidence shows poor observation and handling, fatigue and driver distraction are the main causes of heavy vehicle crashes. Of the 159 crashes involving trucks in the Southern District in 2013, 3 were fatal and 13 were serious injury crashes. The Southern Institute of Technology won the Corporate Recognition Award at the Southland Exporter of the Year Awards for their contribution to the Southern economy through international students. There are 1,000 international students contributing $10 million annually to the city's GDP. SIT Deputy CEO Barrett Gura spoke of the Exporter Award earlier.
Yes, we're very pleased with it, and of course we wouldn't have been able to get this award without the support of the Southland community. The international students has played a very big part at SIT. We now have close to 650 equivalent full-time students, which equates to about just under 1,000 student bodies. Next year we're aiming to do 750, and we're well on track. In terms of comparing it to last year, we grew by 18% this year, and next year we're expecting to grow by 15%.
When we think about exports, we think about, I guess, dairy products and things like that, but we're talking about education, and that is all about, you're acknowledged because you're bringing revenue into the region.
That's correct. So each of our international students, they pay tuition fees anywhere from 16 to 20,000 New Zealand dollars a year. On top of that, they pay for their accommodation and food, which could be around $8,000 to $9,000 a year, depending on whether they bring their families with them or not.
That's a huge contribution. Have the figures been broken down as to what that is to the community here?
Yes, I think, Bill did an economic impact survey for our international students, and it is about $20 million to the economic activity in Invercargill itself. And that equates to about $10 million to Invercargill's GDP, which they also said contributes to about 120 equivalent full-time jobs in Southland. What we're basically looking at aiming is for 1,000 equivalent full-time students by 2017. We feel that the size of the Invercargill community will be able to sustain this number of students. And one of our other strategies is continuing along the lines of offering our programs and qualifications offshore.
Fonterra says the multi-million-dollar investment cements the Edendale site as a key part of the company's manufacturing network. Fonterra is investing $150 million at its Edendale milk processing plant, adding around 1.4 million litres a day of extra processing capacity, as well as allowing product flexibility in manufacturing on site.
For the Edendale site, it means we're going to be able to increase our manufacture of milk protein concentrate, but across our networks of plants in the South Island, it gives us a lot more flexibility in managing milk across the season.
Why is there a need for such an increase in production? What was happening to those milk volumes last season?
Yeah, so year on year in the South Island we're seeing significant milk growth, and under the DERA, or the Dairy Industry Restructuring Act, as Fonterra we've got an obligation to take on any new supply. So as that supply increases across New Zealand, and particularly for us in the South Island, we have to match that with increased processing capacity. We're putting in 3 new plants. So the first one is an RO plant, so that concentrates up the whole milk before going into Edendale Dry 4, and that'll increase the processing capacity of Dry 4 by around about 300,000 litres per day. The second part is milk protein concentrate plant, and that's sort of pre-manufacturing and separates the protein out of skim milk and makes a high protein powder, and that'll be manufactured on Dry 3. And that's about 1.1 million litres a day of extra milk processing capacity. And with that extra processing capacity, we have additional cream to process, and so we're putting in an AMF plant which will be processing around 550,000 litres of cream each day. The timeline for these plants is to have them operational for the next processing season, so we only commenced construction yesterday, actually, on Monday.
How many people are involved in that construction, and what are the employment opportunities that might come out of this in the future?
Yeah, so I don't have exact numbers for those that will be involved in construction, but there'll be significant numbers of tradespeople and engineers and the likes involved in the construction. And post that, for the operation of the plant, we're looking at least 25 new jobs being created on site.
With the increased capacity to produce the different products here, what will it mean on an annual basis for Southland, do you think?
Yeah, so with the extra milk processing, obviously the returns from that go back into the Southland economy, which is fantastic, and that's probably the direct benefit. But also with the extra processing plant, also creates further opportunities for the likes of contracting businesses and that throughout the district. So it's really good for the Southland economy.
Stay with us after the break. We talk capital gains tax with tax expert Craig McAllister. Welcome back. One of Labour's flagship policies this coming election is the introduction of a capital gains tax. Tax expert Craig McAllister says the lack of a capital gains tax is a glaring anomaly and that our tax base is not as broad-based as it could be. Hunter Andrews started by asking Mr McAllister whether capital gains are already taxed in New Zealand.
We have a tax on property sales, so the commonest example is a property purchase for the purpose of sale. So if somebody decides that they're going to buy a house, renovate it and sell it and make a gain, that's taxable now, and it has been for a number of years. When those laws were introduced in the early 1970s, when New Zealand last went through a significant property boom. But that law is quite broad. It covers people subdividing land, so if you subdivide a section and sell off a rear section, potentially that could be caught. If you undertake a major subdivision, that's caught. And if you're a person who is a builder, a dealer or developer, you're generally caught as well. So there are a number of instances when we tax real estate property gains, we just don't call it a capital gains tax.
What's the difference then between what Labor's proposing and what we already have?
What Labor's attempting to do is propose a sort of a more of a general broad-based capital gains tax. Admittedly, there are a number of exemptions or exceptions in that, but it's probably going to take the place of the current tax on the gains that we already have. I mean, sometimes they leave these in place, like for example in Australia. So Australia have their capital gains tax, and they also have a number of taxes on property sales under their ordinary income tax rules. And sometimes it's a big debate about which rule the gain falls in, because one rule might give a favourable outcome versus the income tax rule. I don't recall Labor actually saying what they're going to do with the existing suite of rules, but the options are open for them to either repeal those rules and replace them with the capital gains tax, or leave them in place and they'll work then alongside the capital gains tax.
Problems for Labor describing the policy though, in layman's terms, what does it mean for homeowners, perhaps those without an investment property?
Probably not a lot. I mean, the biggest, obviously the decision to have the capital gains tax is a significant policy step, but by putting the exemption for the family home in there, that's going to take a significant number of people outside that tax, and so in those circumstances it's probably not going to mean a lot for people, with a single dwelling that they live in and don't have a lot of other wealth tied up in property. It's
not just property, is it, that could be hit with a capital gains tax?
That's right. It could extend to a number of other things. For example, artwork, expensive motor vehicles and the like. So there's no reason why capital gains tax will be restricted to just the sales of land and buildings.
We keep hearing the OECD, Labor pretty much putting it out there that most countries in the OECD, if not all, have a capital gains tax. What's your thoughts as a tax expert? Do you think that we should have one or some form of capital gains tax, and has Labor got it right?
I do think it's a glaring anomaly in our tax base. We have a pretty good tax base. We like to think of our tax base as being sort of broad-based and low rate. You'll hear that mantra by a number of people. Personally, I think our tax base is sort of medium rate and not quite as broad as what it could be. I think if you put a CGT in place in New Zealand, then I think you would further look at trading that off and lowering the revenue. So we're consistent with broadening our base but lowering our revenue a bit, and there's a trade-off in that.
The prospect yesterday from John Key of possible, I guess in 3 years, tax cuts, that's more a promise of the injection of more money into the economy, isn't it? But 3 years out.
Yes, I think in one form or other all the political parties are offering tax cuts, particularly for the lower to middle income earners. They're just doing it and just labelling it differently. So for example, the Greens are offering family and child tax credits. Nationalists simply saying we're going to make a cut in the tax rates, and at the end of the day they both amount to the same thing, and that is a lower amount of tax that the tax system is going to take off them, whether it's done by lowering the tax they pay or it's done by a transfer payment back to that particular family. So I don't think that what National is saying is really inconsistent with a lot of the other policies that are providing tax credits in one form or other. It's just really got a different label on it.
And if you want to find out more about taxation policy or any other policy for that matter, then get down to the Salvation Army Citadel on Tay Street from 7:30 tonight for the National Council of Women candidate meeting. Candidates standing for the seats of Invercargill and Clutha Southland will be there discussing key policy issues. We'll bring you coverage in tomorrow night's South Today news. Until then, from the news team, good evening.